Blended workforces are one of the hottest talent strategies today, where employers are using a mix of traditional employees with external resources like independent contractors, coaches, consultants, vendors, and technology solutions, all in order to enhance competitiveness, ensure cost flexibility, and expedite business goals. But how are the successful companies infusing blended workforces into their business strategy? And what are the critical success factors and pitfalls to avoid during implementation? And on the flip side, what does it really take for suppliers to improve their chances of finding and landing contract opportunities? The devil is in the details, my friends. I'm your host, Karen Farrell Rhodes, and it's time to get smarter about blended workforces at work. Hello, my superstars. This is Karen, and welcome to another episode of the Blended Workforces at Work podcast. We are so thrilled to have you join another episode, and boy, you're going to be glad to listen to this episode because we have a tremendous guest on cue. On today's show, we have Tony Buffum, who is the VP of HR Client Strategy at Upwork. And I know many of you are familiar about Upwork, but for the few out there that may not be, Upwork is a global marketplace where organizations can find and offer freelance jobs in various fields and skills. At Upwork, Tony's responsible for accelerating the growth of current and prospective Upwork enterprise level clients, helping them solve their HR challenges related to finance, procurement, and talent transformation. Talk about the perfect guest for the Blended Workforces at Work podcast. He is the epitome because he sees how companies are leveraging external talent to help them grow and remain competitive. So welcome to the podcast, Tony.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you. I told you right before the show I could talk to you for hours, but since we don't have hours, let's jump into some of the topics. But before we do, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you personally. So, for just as much as you feel comfortable, would you give us a sneak peek into your life outside of work?
Yeah, I'd love to. The first thing I think of is I have 3 kids, 15, 12 and a half, and 10. The youngest is my one daughter, 2 boys older than that.
Oh,
And
nice.
they're awesome. They're these great ages where we can do a lot of fun. We can compete together.
Yeah.
I'd never let them win at anything. So when they do, which they're starting to,
Yeah.
it's affecting my ego. But I'm super proud of them. Especially we play basketball a lot.
Nice.
In addition to that, we talked a little bit about dogs before. I have a Bernedoodle. It's about 2.5 years old, and he's just a
Oh,
sweetheart, like the most loving dog that I could imagine. So he's terrific. And I live in Charleston, South Carolina, which is beautiful. I grew up in upstate New York,
uh-huh.
in Rochester.
Yeah.
So this is a dramatic difference in terms of the climate in a lot of ways. But between Rochester and college, also in upstate New York and being here, I've lived in about 8 or 9 different places. So I've moved around quite a bit. And this is where I'll have some roots, at least until all the kids are out of school, probably longer than that. I really enjoy here.
Oh, well, I'm being in Atlanta. We're not too far
Yeah.
from you.
I spend many weekends in Atlanta with my middle son's travel basketball team. So we
Oh,
have a lot of tournaments
okay.
that are in the Atlanta area.
It's the metro of the South, so
Yeah.
I can imagine. But at least you have the change of seasons, not too hot, not too
Yeah.
cold, where you are as well, right?
Yeah. I'm happy with it. It's really
Oh,
nice.
very nice. Well, thank you so much for sharing that tidbit. We
Of
really
course.
appreciate. All right, let's get into brass tacks a bit. Let's start out by featuring you a bit, Tony. And I know you've had a wonderful, extensive career. But can you share just a peek into how you started your career and now how it's progressed to now being a VP at Upwork?
Yeah. I think not everybody gets right out of high school and says they want to be in HR. But when I applied to Cornell's Industrial and Labor Relations program, knowing I wanted to do something in business, and when I saw what the curriculum was, courses in labor history, labor economics, organizational behavior, human resources, collective bargaining, like those all seem like things that I would really enjoy. Just intrinsically interesting and motivating. And I feel like I was very lucky because I absolutely enjoyed everything about that program. It was stimulating, interesting, and it also got me exposed to HR. So one of the first internships I had was with IBM at their headquarters in executive comp, which was a very
Right.
cool space to be in. A lot that was felt like it was over my head, but I felt fortunate to be included. And then
Yep.
I went to Texas Instruments. I was responsible for leading our student program during a co-op, and also supported our diversity office, which I really enjoyed. I felt like it was still something that was just new to organizations. And I returned to TI for a couple summers after that. I really loved that business. I love what they did. I love the changes it was going through. But when I graduated, I took a job with General Electric's HR leadership program. And I'm sure, as a lot of people know, GE was well known for its leadership development. It was the prime place to be, and especially in HR. I thought
Yeah.
this was the pentultimate program, and I still believe that it's one of the best programs in the world.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I love the opportunity, like I kind of alluded to earlier, to move around after every roughly 8 months, not just doing different HR assignments, which I did in union relations, in typical kind of corporate generalist support, but also a cross-functional rotation. I spent a early part of my career in manufacturing plants. And so I managed a sheet metal fabrication department for 8 or 9 months. So I like that I got to do things outside of just my function. And I
What a
stayed with
variety.
GE for a couple of years after that within its lighting business, also still manufacturing, but also owning all of what we called organization and staffing, which is all of the internal and moves, external hiring, but planning succession and our annual review process, which there, and I think like a lot of organizations, there's an annual event, but it's an ongoing effort, especially for
Absolutely.
the HR leaders that kind of direct traffic. And after that 4 years total at GE, I left to go work for the Stanley Works. It provided me an opportunity to move to a location I want to be in, which happened to be Allentown, PA at the time, and support a business that was primarily focused on sheet metal fabrication. So it just felt like this great fit. But it was my first global HR management role, the small division.
What an
And
opportunity.
that just grew over time, over about a 10 or 12 year career with Stanley, eventually Stanley Black and Decker, then eventually chief HR officer at FLIR Systems, and then eventually Upwork.
Wow, what a journey. And what a fantastic experience. I think you and I have that in common. I was, quote unquote, that girl who was assigned to all kinds of special rotations and projects, as long as it had to do with the strategic side of HR or transformations. That was the one that was tapped on, and I love the variety. I love, love, love the variety of opportunities, and it sounds like you got that as well throughout your
Absolutely.
career. Well, let's talk a bit about Upwork. And the reason why you're so ideal as a guest on our podcast is because you see, especially at the enterprise level. I mean, I was 14 years at Microsoft, and then previous AT&T, Comcast, and other the enterprise level. And I know there is a different dynamic at the enterprise level than there usually is at the SMB level as it relates to a lot of things. But since you have experience with the working with enterprise levels, can you share what you've seen as far as trends on how they're leveraging Upwork to scale up and scale down their teams in order to get work done?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with it is different at the enterprise level. I'd say primarily these large, big companies, lots of employees, and lots of bureaucracy typically are hard to get them to adopt a different way of doing things
Yeah.
because they've done it for decades. And it's kind of like, if it's not broke, don't fix
Don't
it.
fix it.
But really, it might not seem broken yet, but if it's not caught up with the way that talent is working and will be working, it is broken. You just don't see it. And so with large enterprises, they're adopting more of this agility, flexibility approach of having a smaller core of full-time employees and leveraging a much bigger, you know, team of not just freelancers or independent talent, but lots of different resources. I call it the workforce ecosystem approach, where they have a lot of different resources and levers that they can pull on in order to get things done or source work within their organization. And that's some functions, even within those large enterprises, get it before others. But once they see how effective that is, how it's working, enabling a lot more flexibility and agility, but I think most importantly now, access to new technology, other functions start to get on board as well.
Oh, I love that. And the way we define blended workforces, it's not only the traditional full-time employee talent inside of organizations, but it's the external resources, vendors, suppliers, independent contractors, blah blah blah, you name it. And we include technology into this as well,
Absolutely.
because managers and leaders are having to think about all of these entities as they do their workforce planning and deciding how to best get work done in a cost effective manner that keeps them competitive. And so we know blended workforce is a big umbrella, and there's a lot of aspects around blended workforces, your remote work versus on site and all of that kind of thing. But in your opinion, what do you think is the power of employers really considering a blended workforce strategy into their people strategies? And then what do you think is a downfall or a roadblock they frequently hit, or a blind spot that is sometimes a negative if they don't look at it deeply? So what's something great about the blended workforce strategy, and then what's something they need to watch out for?
Okay. Well, there's a lot that's great, but I would say the number one thing, I talk to all functional leaders, CFOs, like that they are able to leverage costs a lot more efficiently. And HR leaders love it because they have a lot more options for accessing all sorts of diverse talent and all sorts of different skill sets and capabilities. But
Yeah.
to me, the number one value proposition is speed. When you have different levers and different places you can go for talent, and you can bring it all together to work cohesively, collaboratively, it enables you to get the talent that you need when and where you need it so much faster than the traditional paradigm of only hiring full-time employees. And that blended workforce enables organizations not only to get talent in quickly, but adapt quickly to changes in the market, changes with their peers or within their own organization. And that adaptability, enabled and provided by speed, is it just a game changer and true differentiator for organizations that embrace it.
I agree.
At the
Yes.
same time, the biggest challenge that anybody that's thinking about a blended workforce, or I'm sure anybody working through it now, is that change management effort. This is a paradigm shift. So I often say we no longer live in a world like my dad went to work for Xerox for 42 years, retired with a pension. That was a different environment. And frankly,
Right.
organizations were a bit more paternalistic, and people looked to companies to keep them on board for a long time. Now we see the next generation, more than 50% of Gen Z enters the workforce not looking for traditional jobs. So that is mind blowing for probably a lot of listeners, but definitely hiring managers to think, well, then where am I supposed to find this talent? And trust me, it's getting harder and harder because the global workforce participation rate is decreasing, has been for the last 20 years, is going to continue, while population rates are shrinking. And so it's going to be harder and harder to find that talent if the only pond you're fishing in for talent is full-time employees. But
Yeah.
at the same time, there's this massive pool of talent that's increasing every year, made up of freelance and independent contractors and all sorts of other types of employment or work, providing work, whatever it might be. The biggest challenge is that's just different. It's different in a lot of ways. It usually involves remote work at a rate that still a lot of leaders and managers aren't comfortable with. And that's just the start. So the biggest challenge is the change management effort to get other leaders, once you're bought in and you're a champion, but other leaders to recognize the value, shake the stigmas away from, different types of workers, and realize this is a major and critical piece of the future of work.
couldn't have said it better myself. That is so true. I totally high five you on that because it is the future, and leaders, especially executive leaders, their ability to be able to drive the workforce to embrace how well blended workforces are of the now and of the future. It's here. It's needed for companies to remain competitive. It's just truly totally important. Now, I know you had a perspective on talent access versus talent acquisition. So, why is it important for companies to kind of rethink their perspective or have a mind shift of talent access versus talent acquisition? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think this is at the nucleus of that paradigm shift we were just talking about. And when you think about it, this idea of acquisition, I always say organizations have this mentality that they acquire and they own their talent and everything they design, develop, and dream. It's all like it belongs to them. The
Right.
best example I can give, I had a conversation with some CHROs, and I had one, of course, talked about Upwork, but talked about this whole paradigm shift. And I had a leader say, Tony, you know what my issue is with your platform? Is I worry about all of the people I have in my team, on my technology team, that are already, working on your platform as like a side hustle. And kind of flippantly, my reaction was,
Wow.
that sounds like a you problem. And
Yeah.
intentionally, because there's a few things. Like one, to me, the first questions you should be asking are, why are they also potentially on this platform? They're not
Absolutely.
making enough money. They feel like they have to supplement their income.
Right.
They're not engaged enough. What they're doing is no longer exciting and motivating to them. So they want to explore things that are interesting. They're concerned about their job security. So they want to create an alternative career option and safety net. There's a lot of different reasons.
Right.
But I think what's more important is the talent acquisition mindset behind that comment, which is
I
if
own you.
which I own you. So what that leader to me is really saying is if they have extra time, why am I not getting that time?
Yeah.
That they should be giving that back to me.
Yeah.
And to me, what they're missing is if they're doing their job and they're meeting all your objectives, they're giving you what you pay them to do.
Exactly.
If they aren't, then performance manage that. Like,
That's right.
you're an HR leader, like drive the performance management process, get them back up to speed. But if they are, the rest of their time belongs to them. And that is more of the access mentality, this kind of abundance mentality of, okay, I'm getting what I contracted and what I expected to get out of this employee, which is well defined. There's goals, measurements, and an annual process around evaluating and recognizing that. So once you're getting that, whatever they want to do belongs to them. It doesn't
I
belong to me just because they're my employee. And
That's right.
that's an important shift because once leaders, especially HR leaders, but all leaders embrace that thinking, it also opens up the idea that all this other talent that doesn't necessarily want to just work for one company
Mhm.
could also provide their skills, their capabilities to yours if you just opened up the aperture to make it happen. And yeah, they're going to go work for other companies. That's okay because that benefits you. They'll
That's
come to your
right.
organization with different ideas, this diversity of thought,
Thoughts.
because they did a similar project for a different company that maybe had a different approach that they can suggest. And that
That's right.
benefits, to me, that benefits everybody. So I think embracing that opens up so many doors. And it also opens up this workforce ecosystem that we're talking about, this blended workforce model that brings so many other benefits to the organization and the talent that's engaged with that organization.
Gosh, we are so aligned in that thinking. I always say, as long as an employee is doing the essential functions of the job to a satisfactory level, that is the employment contract between you and that individual. And if they're doing it and they can do it in 4 hours versus eight, that's on them. But as long as you're getting high performance for what you paid for, that's perfect. And the rest, to your point, they should be able to flex and do other things. I do know it's going to take time to kind
Yeah.
of infuse that into the culture, especially since a lot of the executive leaders are older than some of our younger folks, but I believe over time it will change because it has to. Things
Yeah,
are just going, 50 million miles a minute. It's hyper competitive out there. There's so many global changes and geopolitics going on. It's just going to be critical for the future. And so those companies that are able to recognize that they need a blended workforce and needs more flexibility in how they get work done, those are going to be the ones that are going to be sustainable for the long term, in
absolutely.
my Karen's opinion.
I mean, you said it. Like we couldn't be more in lockstep because as much as companies need to adapt and change, just look at the S&P 500. You know,
Right.
even 20 or 30 years ago, much less 10,
It didn't
and
look
how
like it
many
does
companies are
today.
gone.
Yes.
Like if you can't create adaptability, flexibility, agility within your organization to meet the needs of your customers and therefore your organization design today, then
Yeah,
you're going to struggle, fall behind, and someone is going to disrupt you. And
that's right.
so like that's why I think it's so important to embrace this new way of working, because it is a new way of working. It's not abandoning full-time employees. Like neither you or I is saying employees are a thing of the past,
No, no, no,
but
not at
we're
all.
saying
Right.
it's an and strategy, not an or.
Correct. Let's underscore that. Yes. Now, Tony, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up, this day and age's hot topic, which is Gen AI, and it's impacting every industry, every job profession, every business, everything. So I'm just curious, in your opinion, with the rise of Gen AI, how do you think it's going to impact the way HR leaders think about hiring and constructing their workforce?
Yeah, I mean, we see headlines about, AI replacement for jobs kind of on a regular basis, which I personally think is hyperbole. I think the reality, and I love this, is a saying we hear all the time. I'm just going to repeat it. It's
Yeah,
not AI that's going to replace people in jobs. It's going to be people using AI that replace
correct.
people that don't.
Yes.
So understanding that, but also understanding the point I made earlier, like we have this constant trend of less and less people entering the traditional workforce globally.
Right.
We also have there's a great Korn Ferry article released earlier this year about the multi-trillion-dollar skills gap and talent gap that we're facing by 2030. There's a need to maximize productivity and efficiency now. And here comes generative AI. When we take a look at what we do, how much of the tasks of what we work on in our jobs
Yeah.
that's less value added, that is administrative, or that could just really be enhanced with faster, better knowledge or better triggers of our creative thinking. The more that we can take off our plate that doesn't add that value and maximize the true value, critical thought, empathy, all those things, judgment that people have that the technology won't, the better, more productive, and effective every function will be. So I really see it opening up the aperture for all functions. But if we focus in on HR for a second,
Yeah, sure.
one of the things I loved the most throughout my career is being that strategic, trusted advisor to a business leader or for a while, my CEO.
Me
But
too.
there's
Yeah.
always work that's kind of burdened by that keeps you away. And at every level, I think that's true, whether you're an HR manager or a specialist and you're trying to influence a hiring manager on a decision, whatever it might be. Our value comes in really understanding the talent, understanding the organization, the cultural fit, trying to make the best decision for the organization that's possible. And when we can have more time to understand the business, the balance sheet, the business model, everything about how it operates, and bring all that together, the value we provide for our leaders is significantly higher.
It
But we
sure is.
need technology to help pull a lot more of that off our plate. And I think that generative
Yes.
AI, I mean, I already see it, but I think generative AI is going to massively impact the HR function in particular and free them to be those value added advisors that they can and I think want to be.
I agree. I think, though, there's a gap on the learning curve for most HR teams and leaders. So they're having to try to catch up and really understand what it means for them. So, yes, and that. And I also think that I always love the joke. I've never yet in my 20 plus year career have found an overstaffed HR function. If
No.
you have, I'd love to hear it. But they're usually understaffed or they have more work than the team can do and less time for, to your point, the strategic side of the people side of business. So having AI help out with a lot of those tasks that are ideal for the technology and moving HR closer to what you said, the business, and helping think through strategies and how that's going to affect the workforce, I think will be invaluable moving forward. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that point
Mhm.
on the gap. And I think there's a few things that drives. One, there's a survey done by Valoir Digital. It was their digital transformation survey. Now, this is back in 2021, but they surveyed every function of businesses. And what they found out, which isn't surprising to you, I'm sure, is that HR is way behind every other function in terms of its journey towards digital transformation. So you
Yeah.
couple that with a Sage survey that I think is from 2022 that showed that the majority of HR leaders or majority of HR professionals want to leave the function entirely. It's something like 62%.
Wow.
And to me, those are related. Like, I don't want
Yeah.
to necessarily suggest causation, but there's definitely a correlation
Right.
because at the pace, and you've mentioned this already, at the pace that macroeconomic conditions are changing. There's so much more that's brought in the workplace. There's so much higher expectations for HR to help the organization navigate this, but they haven't kept up with the rest of the organization on that digital journey.
Yeah,
It's just feeling more and more like a burden.
it
And the
is.
more that we can do to help HR functions adapt digitally, lean in to new digital technology, and embrace new processes, systems, and tools, the more I think the HR function can help itself be
Yeah,
prepared to take on new things like generative AI.
I agree. I agree. Well, I know I don't have a lot of more time left with you, but I'd be remiss if I didn't give a little airtime to the other side of blended workforces, meaning the external workforce side. So I'm curious your thoughts on how individuals who are interested in freelancing or putting their names up for opportunities on, say, like Upwork, how can they best prepare and to be considered as a finalist of choice, if you will? Because I found that there are a lot of people that leave corporate America or leave other experiences, hang out a shingle, but really haven't embraced the business of running a business. So I'm just curious, how do you all prepare and onboard your people that sign up for Upwork to be prepared to be placed at a company?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I talk to a lot of HR professionals I used to work with that'll say, Tony, I'm getting ready to leave, or I just want to change and I want to be independent. I want the freedom and I want to work with different companies and not just one. And always my advice, I've never done it. So I'm not speaking from experience. Even
Mm,
at Upwork, I'm one of their full-time employees.
right.
But what I've learned from talking to so many other consultants and people that work independently is you don't spend nearly as much time now in your full-time role marketing and generating new business.
Right.
But this is now a big part of your responsibility. If you're going to be independent and own your own business, and even if your own business is you and your brain and your experience and your heart, all of those things, you're going to have to market and sell. And so if
Yeah.
you're getting on a platform like ours, there's certainly tools that people can use to understand how they can better magnify their profile, how they can use language that's going to connect with employers. In fact, we have a great generative AI tool that helps walk people through not only how to set up their profile, maximize it, but also how to find the right jobs and the right fit that they can bid on to improve their chances of winning that work. So
Right.
we're already leveraging that generative AI tool on both sides of the platform to enable better matching, better experience, but most importantly, better traction out of the gate. Because certainly folks that get on a marketplace like ours or many of the hundreds, when they don't start finding that work, they get discouraged,
They do.
understandably.
They
So we
do.
want them to have the best experience possible and help them along that way. But at the end of the day, they've got to be committed to generating, kind of doing some of that commercial work, generating the business and selling themselves a little bit because that's their business now
That is
themselves.
their business. And in full disclosure, listeners, I am an Upwork customer. They did not pay me to get Tony on the podcast. He was so kind just to do it out of the kindness of his heart. But I am an Upwork customer and an Upwork fan. And we can't talk about and teach blended workforces if we're not doing it ourselves. So we appreciate the company and all you do. Now, quickly, Tony, before we let you go, we have a signature question we love to ask our guests. It comes out of our own research study on high performing leaders and what it takes to differentiate yourselves when you're executing on various leadership initiatives. And we have 7 that came out of our research that were universal no matter one's job or profession or industry. And we asked you which one of the 7 really popped for you. And you were so kind to share that leading with strategic decision making really resonated with you. And for my newer listeners, this is all about your ability to make good decisions yourself or lead a great decision making process with teams or individuals that you're working with. So curious minds want to know, Tony, why did strategic decision making really resonate with you?
I've had the privilege to lead many global HR teams. And when I thought of that particular skill set or capability, I thought, I make better decisions because I work closely with a really bright and smart team. So, having a team to help me make great decisions allows me as a leader to make better decisions. But
Right.
all of that starts with data. It always has to be data based. You have to understand your business, like we talked about earlier, and understand whatever supporting information can help you make things that can often be emotional more concrete. But starting with that data and then continuing, of course, with the vision, mission, purpose of the organization in mind, I think
Yeah.
as a strategic leader, that always has to be the guiding light. And you're thinking long term. And vision, mission, purpose are typically long-term guiding lights towards what do you want to do with your organization and what's in its best interest. And then finally, last but not least at all, leveraging your experience and empathy. And I think especially in HR, that's so critical in a day and age where there's so much change, there's so much pressure externally, and so much confusion, within a workforce.
Yes.
Being able to pull all that together and then make decisions for the organization along with your team has the biggest, best strategic impact. And that's always what I've loved the most about all those previous jobs. Now in this role, as I get to meet with executives in a lot of different functions, I really lean into how can I help them be in the best position to maximize their time in thinking about those strategic decisions and leveraging the best tools and enabling their team to support them.
And what a gift you are to those individuals, because your knowledge is absolutely phenomenal, and your passion around really helping to invest into their success is clear, quite clear. So, Tony, we are going to have a lot of information about you and Upwork in our show notes, but I'd love to give time for our guests to give voice to where to find you personally, or where to find Upwork. So would you mind sharing?
Yeah, Upwork's not hard to find. It is the world's largest
It is.
global talent marketplace. It's part of why, one, in my time at Stanley and at FLIR, I was an Upwork client, an enterprise client, fell in love with what it enabled myself and my organizations to do, which is why I eventually came on board. Over 20 million different talents across 180 different countries. That's why I say it's not hard to find. It's out there.
It's
You
out
just got to
there.
know what to do when you find it. And that's what our conversation is all about.
Yeah.
For me, they can just find me on LinkedIn. I love to connect with people that want to continue this conversation, want to learn more, want to understand how do they really get traction with this within their organizations, to the change management conversation we had before. But most importantly, that are trying hard to embrace this new way of work, starting with work, not just with jobs, and then redesigning organizations with blended workforces so they can meet the goals of today and tomorrow. So They can reach out to me anytime. I'd love to connect with more folks or share that passion and curiosity.
That sounds wonderful for sharing that information. And just a note, listeners, Upwork, although Tony focuses on enterprise level clients, small, medium businesses are huge clients for Upwork as well, as they need to add individuals to their teams in a fractional manner. So it's really for everybody. And it's a huge platform, as he said, and you'd be silly not to take advantage of it because there's some great talent on Upwork, if I do say so myself. So. Well, Tony, it has been an absolute dream to have you on the podcast. So I know you're very busy. You travel all over the world, but we really appreciate you carving out time to share some of your insights and what Upwork does with our listeners. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. I love what you do to continue to help organizations sort out how do they meet the moment, especially HR leaders. They need to embrace this. So I love that they can listen to your podcast, these messages, see that it's happening already, and that you help connect the dots so that they can feel empowered to take lead, champion this themselves in their organization. So I feel so privileged to be a part of this conversation. I'm so grateful to have met and connected with you, and I wish you the absolute best going forward.
Oh, thank you for those kind words. Really appreciate it. And thank you too, listeners, for joining another episode of the Blended Workforces at Work podcast. We know that there are literally millions of other podcasts out there that you could be listening to, so we do not take your listening time lightly. Please be sure to subscribe or like our podcast so that we can help spread the word. And why don't you just invite one of your friends, just one, that's all we're asking, to listen in, because by doing so, we will all get smarter about blended workforces at work. Thanks a ton, and see you next week.
Well, that's our show for today. Thank you again for listening to the Blended Workforces at Work podcast. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at blendedworkforcesatwork.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, or YouTube by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your favorite podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand, contract, fractional, or project basis. Huge thanks to the SDL production and editing team for a job well done. Bye for now.